Welcome to another episode of InRange. As you see on the table, I've got a selection of lever action Winchesters here. That's because I'm a big fan of Winchester lever actions. And I don't even necessarily mean the brand Winchester, because current Winchesters are actually made in Japan under the brand name of Moroku. But I digress. What I appreciate is the action, the Winchester action. Now, originally the 1860 Henry had the same exact action in it, but then when it became Winchester, they added the Kingsgate loading patent, and they added a handguard here, which greatly improved the handling and capabilities of the rifle in general. The fact that you could load from the rear instead of from a tube in the front, and that the magazine tube was not exposed to the elements, is a huge upgrade from the original 1860 Henry. So in this regard, if you're interested in buying a lever action rifle and you are there only for historical reasons and you really want a 1860 model, then feel free to do so. But when it comes to actually shooting and enjoying the rifles, or for that matter using them in competition, you really don't want an 1860 Henry regardless of the manufacturer. So I recently announced Deadeye, which is a new cowboy division at my Brutality matches. In fact, I shot it in the last handgun CQB Brutality match, and I plan to shoot Deadeye in a bunch of future upcoming Brutality matches, but that's not the point of this video. That said, you can shoot Deadeye in one of the Brutality matches with just a lever gun. And in that regard, you'd want to be looking at a pistol caliber lever gun. And this has instigated a lot of interest, at least amongst the InRange community and on my Discord server, and discussion about what lever action people might want to use if they were to acquire their first one to shoot in the Deadeye division. And I've seen people talking about Henry USA, the big boy, as well as the 1860. I've seen people talking about Marlins, which has now been reintroduced. Marlin is now back on the market, being manufactured under Ruger. And I'm going to reference that more in a minute. And of course, the venerable Winchester style actions, most of them coming from Italian manufacturer Uberti and imported by a number of different importers. And I'm here to tell you, I am so certain of this from decades of cowboy action shooting, amongst other use of lever action rifles, that if you are to acquire a lever action rifle, you want a Winchester style action for sure. So the reality is the 1860 Henry, as I mentioned before, with the front loading magazine tube, exposure to the elements, and no handguard, really take it off the table from the perspective of a competitive gun. If you want one for fun, feel free and have at it. And even if you were to want to get an 1860 Henry, I still recommend an Italian reproduction over the Henry USA guns. I had a Henry USA gun for a while. The outside of it looked nice, but when I took it apart, the internals had cast and MIM parts. And the Henry USA 1860 Henry is double, if not more, the price of the Italian reproduction equivalent. The Italian guns work just fine. So I cannot justify the cost there, nor was I impressed with the internal components. So in that regard, I would take the 1860 Henry off the table in general, regardless of if it's Italian or American made, just because it's not really a modern enough, which is a weird word to use, for the purposes of what we're discussing today. Also, I'm not here to discuss rifle caliber lever actions. Personally, my interest in lever action rifles come in pistol caliber cartridge chamberings. I find these guns to be amazingly effective when you chamber them in a pistol cartridge. And of course, the original 1860 Henry was in 44 Henry rimfire, later 44 Henry centerfire. The 1866 was in 44 Henry, and then the 1873 introduced the 44 Winchester centerfire, now known as 4440. However, in the modern day, you can get any of these reproductions pretty much chambered in anything, the most common ones being 38/357 Magnum and 45 Colt. Now, 45 Colt was never historically used in lever actions. They were only used in Colt pistols, and the original 45 Colt cartridge didn't even have a rim sufficiently large to be used in a lever action rifle. Over time, the 45 Colt cartridge is modernized, and you can now use 45 Colts no problem in any lever action rifle. And I frankly use most of them in 45 Colt, specifically because most of my handguns are already 45 Colt, and therefore having the same ammunition for all of my weapons is very useful, especially in a competition. So, I've already discarded Henry USA. Hopefully that makes sense. The 1860 doesn't make sense, and their big boy guns are frankly, weird. They have a weird action, and I'm not a fan of them. And in fact, at CQB Brutality, there was one competitor that had a Henry Big Boy that had a malfunction so bad that I could not figure out how to clear it, even with a complete toolkit. So, not a fan, not interested, and you're not going to hear me on this channel recommend their products. Now, if you have one and like it, I think that's great. Enjoy it. I'm not saying you shouldn't have one, but I'm not recommending you buy one if you're going out for your first lever action rifle. When it comes to Marlin, now this is the one that seems to be the most contentious. Now, Marlin used to make really high quality guns, and then they made really low quality guns, and Remington acquired them, and the Remington Marlins are, by all internet lore and knowledge, complete junk. And now Ruger has reintroduced the Marlin 1894, and I have no idea if they're good or not. I did recently watch a video from the Military Arms channel about the new Marlin. They look like they're being made well, and so I'm going to take his word on the fact that it's a quality gun. However, one of the things that caught my eye in Tim's video, and hopefully, Tim, you don't mind me using this little snippet that was in your video, when he was firing the gun, one of the things the Marlin does is during the cycle of popping a round out of the magazine tube to the lifting mechanism to get it into the chamber, is it kind of lets loose of the round. It doesn't control the feeding of the round very effectively. And in fact, if you are running a Marlin very fast or short stroke it a little bit by accident, the round will pop out and be floating around essentially in the receiver. In fact, if you turn the gun over, it'll just fall out. And then if you try to run the action again, you can cause a malfunction in a Marlin that is so significant that it requires tools and remover of the lever to be able to clear it. You're not going to clear it on the clock. And so, Tim, I hope you don't mind. Here's a little snippet of him shooting, and you can see that the round pops loose and the gun almost jams up. He makes it through, but if that had gone wrong, it would have been a catastrophic malfunction. A Marlin double feed is something to not mess with. And in fact, I don't have any Marlins, so I can't demonstrate this to you directly, and I don't really want to own one, regardless of the quality of manufacturer. Even if the Ruger Marlins are beautiful quality control, I still am not interested in the Marlin because I'm not interested in the Marlin action. I just don't like the design. The fact that it doesn't have controlled feeding and the fact that you can get lockups that are so significant that it requires tools to clear is sufficient for me. As well as they're just not as smooth and as fast, in my opinion, on the clock. Now, if you don't believe me, just simply Google search Marlin 1894 lockup or Marlin 1894 jam, and you will find extensive people discussing multiple types of malfunctions and jams, not just in forums, but also in videos with their Marlin 1894, again, regardless of quality of manufacture. So what that brings us to are the remaining lever actions that are really viable on the market today. So what that leaves you is the Winchester action. And there's a reason the Winchester action has been popular for as long as it has throughout American history. It's simple, it's reliable, it's durable, it's fast, and it's easy to deal with in the field. So when you go to the 1866, you can maybe get those sometimes a little cheaper than the 1873, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. And in fact, I use this 1866 as my primary standard cowboy action shooting gun. However, there are some problems with the 1866. It does not have an out-of-battery safety that was added to the 1873, and if you're running the action really fast on an 1866 and don't quite have the lever shut, you can actually fire an 1866 out of battery. Additionally, if you have any need to clean or get into the system on an 1866, you have to remove both the lever screw and the side plate screw to remove the side plates, and then all the parts sort of fall out. And it's significantly more difficult to maintain, either in the field or at home, just based on that alone. So in regards to the issue of the potentiality of having an out-of-battery detonation if you're going fast, and the fact that it's harder to maintain, plus the brass tends to get a little weird patina on it, maybe that's cool, maybe you don't care, maybe you do care. The 1866 is an interesting historical novelty. I do like them, but I don't recommend them. So what we're left with now when it comes to a pistol caliber lever action rifle, the real obvious choice is the 1873 Winchester. The 1873 brings everything to the table that you would possibly want. Kingsgate loading patent. It has a dust cover for the top so you can keep dirt and debris out of the system. And it has a safety based on the gun being in full closed battery state before you're able to pull the trigger. If you're running an 1873 very fast and you don't have the lever quite all the way closed to hit the safety notch, you will not be able to pull the trigger and drop the hammer. This does a number of things. One, you're not going to have an out of battery detonation. Additionally, you're not going to induce a malfunction or have to cock the hammer by dropping the hammer earlier than you should have before the round is actually properly seated in the chamber. With the 1866, just because you drop the hammer early doesn't necessarily mean you'll have an out of battery detonation, but it does mean you've dropped the hammer, at which point you've got to close the bolt, recock the hammer and fire if you have the cognition to do so, especially when going fast, or cycle the action again, at which point you lose a round. So the 1873 prevents you from having a safety issue and also prevents you from accidentally dropping the hammer before you intend to. Additionally, the dust cover makes a big difference. The fact that this is a case-hardened steel, sometimes called iron in some instances, receiver, means it's much more resilient to scratches, etc. And the fact that the side plate is easily removable with just one single screw and all the parts don't just fall out on the table means that you can maintain and clean an 1873 much easier than you can in 1866. Now, the two 1873s that exist on the market that you're probably looking at, if you're now convinced, are the Italian reproductions. Uberti is the most common one, and the Winchester manufactured one, which is made in Japan by Moroku. I have this Moroku. I think this Moroku gun is fantastic. I think the fit and finish is fantastic. I think the action is fantastic. This gun runs great. In fact, I run a Brutality match with this particular rifle a couple years back. That said, I'm not necessarily going to recommend the Moroku, even though everything about it is good and it's high quality control, beautiful fit and finish. The reality is the Uberti Italian guns dominate the market. And what that means is that anything you want to do with your gun with any form of aftermarket parts, replace the rear sight, replace a part, put anything on it, anything you want to do at all, somebody has something for the Uberti rifles. And the Winchester Moroku guns are just enough different that parts for the Uberti will not fit in the Winchester. So if you need to fix your Moroku or want to modify your Moroku, you're going to have a much more difficult time doing so. Additionally, this Moroku at least came with a little brass front sight, and I don't care for that. I like the regular standard traditional historical sight that comes on the Italian guns. So now, when we talk about chambering, you can get these in 44-40. You can get them in 45 Colt, 38-357, 44 Special, pretty much every pistol caliber you can think of if you look hard enough. And there's some interesting things you can do with 44 that are going to be a separate video for today. But unless you're a dedicated reloader, meaning that you've got a full reloading rig at home and you're willing to reload for 45 Colt, 44-40, which by the way is a real problem anyway because getting brass for 44-40 is significantly difficult, or 44 Special or 44 Russian or any of these things, unless you're a reloader, you're going to be paying $1 or more per round to fire your gun. If you get the gun in 38/357, you have the lowest cost possible for off-the-shelf factory ammunition, as well as you have the ability to downgrade or upgrade the power you wish to emit from the rifle based on chambering it in 38 or 357. So in that regard, I recommend 38/357. Lastly, barrel length. This little guy here looks real convenient, right? Shorter barrel. And guess what? This little guy is very convenient. The problem is the magazine tube is the same length of your barrel. So you buy the capacity of your rifle, meaning the amount of ammunition it stores in the magazine, based on the length of the rifle. So in cowboy action shooting, traditional cowboy action shooting, you never fire more than 10 rounds out of your rifle. Therefore, a little shorty like this that holds only 10 rounds, good to go. But if you're in the field or you're shooting a Brutality match where we have no such 10-round limitations, you want the most capacity possible. That means you want the longest barrel possible, and you just deal with the realities of the ergonomic loss, whatever that means, for having to move in and out of barricades and stuff with a slightly longer barrel, which frankly doesn't matter that much. Uberti guns command some kind of a premium. They're not cheap, and they're going to be over $1,000, $1,300, $1,400, maybe more, maybe less on a good day, but they cost money. If you are trying to pinch pennies or can't afford to do otherwise and want a lever action rifle in your life that's chambered in a pistol caliber, I still recommend 38/357, but the Rossi Winchester 92s are a really good value. I think you'll eventually outgrow the gun and probably want to upgrade to a 73. Ironically, a 92 is sort of a downgrade from the speed and smoothness of an 1873. They were getting to the point where they were starting to strengthen the action to put more powerful rounds in it. And when they started doing that, they started losing the beauty of the lever action rifle in terms of how easy and smooth it is to run, in my opinion. However, you can get a Rossi 38-357 for a lot less than a Uberti 73, and you will still have a lovely time shooting a Winchester-based lever action rifle, and hopefully you would join us at Deadeye doing so. So, if you want my recommendation about what lever action you should purchase a 24-inch 38/357 Magnum 1873 Winchester from Uberti. Hopefully this helps you in regards to maybe your decision-making process, whether you want a lever action rifle in your life, just because lever action rifles are amazing and uniquely American, and I love them, and you should too. Or maybe you'd consider joining us at Brutality Match in the new Deadeye division. You only need one gun if you want to shoot in Deadeye. You can shoot many guns, you can have 3 handguns and a rifle, whatever you want to do, but you can shoot Deadeye with just one lever action rifle, and we'd love to see you there. You can find our matches at brutalitymatches.org. But if you're not going to do any of that, perhaps you can consider supporting the channel. It's you, the viewer, that make it possible for me to do this kind of content and bring you these sorts of insights, because I've competed with these guns for a long time, and hopefully you find it valuable and useful. If you'd like to do so, you can do so at patreon.com/InRangeTV. If you're already there, thank you for doing it. And if you can't do any of that, I totally understand. You know what? Just subscribe to the channel and share with your friends. Help us break out of that terrible YouTube algorithm. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more.